The upscale mall buzzed with life, a microcosm of affluence and diversity. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, casting a golden glow on the polished marble floors. The air was filled with the hum of conversation, the clinking of coffee cups, and the faint melody of a piano playing in the distance. It was a place where people came to indulge, to escape, and to feel a part of something bigger. In the midst of this vibrant scene, Major General Jasmine Washington stood out, not because she sought attention, but because of the quiet dignity she carried. Dressed in a crisp white blazer and dark jeans, her posture was straight but relaxed, a subtle reminder of her military background. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her eyes scanned the mall with a mix of curiosity and appreciation. This was her first visit to the mall, and though she moved with the confidence of someone who had commanded thousands, there was a hint of vulnerability in her expression. She was new to the area, having recently bought a house in the community, and this outing was part of her effort to settle into her new life. As she walked past a storefront, a display of modern home decor caught her eye. She paused, tilting her head slightly as she studied a sleek, minimalist lamp. A small smile played on her lips as she imagined it in her new living room. She stepped inside, greeted by the soft scent of lavender and the warm glow of carefully arranged lighting. The store was a blend of modern and rustic, with wooden shelves holding ceramic vases, abstract art, and carefully curated furniture. General Washington moved through the space with purpose, her fingers brushing against a woven throw blanket before she picked up a set of coasters made from reclaimed wood. Her thoughts drifted as she examined the items. She had always loved the idea of creating a home that reflected both strength and warmth, a place where she could unwind after long days and host friends and colleagues. This move felt like a fresh start, a chance to build something meaningful in a community she was eager to be a part of. She had already met a few neighbors, all of whom had been welcoming, and she looked forward to exploring more of what the town had to offer. As she approached the counter to make her purchase, she noticed a police officer patrolling the mall. He was tall, with a stern expression and a posture that suggested authority. She thought nothing of it at the time, assuming he was simply doing his job. Little did she know, her day of normalcy was about to take a dramatic turn. The cashier, a young woman with a bright smile, rang up General Washington's items. "These are beautiful choices," she said, wrapping the coasters in tissue paper. "Are you new to the area?" "Yes, I just moved here," General Washington replied, her voice warm but measured. "I'm still getting to know the place, but I love it so far." The cashier nodded enthusiastically. "You picked a great time to move here. The community is really growing, and there's always something going on. You should check out the farmers market on Saturdays, it's amazing." "I'll definitely do that," General Washington said, her smile widening. She paid for her items and thanked the cashier before stepping back into the bustling mall. As she walked, she felt a sense of contentment. The mall was a reflection of the community she had chosen, diverse, vibrant, and full of potential. She passed a group of teenagers laughing near a fountain, an elderly couple holding hands as they window shopped, and a young mother pushing a stroller while balancing shopping bags. It was a snapshot of everyday life, and she felt grateful to be a part of it. Her next stop was a bookstore, its window display featuring a mix of bestsellers and local authors. She had always been an avid reader, and the thought of adding a few new books to her collection was appealing. As she browsed the shelves, she overheard snippets of conversation, a book club discussing their latest read, a child excitedly pointing out a picture book, and a couple debating which novel to buy for their upcoming vacation. The store was cozy, with soft lighting and the faint smell of coffee from the cafe in the corner. General Washington selected a memoir by a prominent military leader and a novel set in a small town. As she waited in line to pay, she glanced at her watch. It was still early, and she had plenty of time to explore more of the mall. She thought about grabbing a coffee and maybe even treating herself to a slice of cake at the cafe. It had been a while since she had allowed herself such a leisurely afternoon, and she was determined to enjoy it. As she left the bookstore, she noticed the same police officer she had seen earlier. He was standing near the entrance, his eyes scanning the crowd. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and she offered a polite nod. He didn't respond, his expression remaining stern. She shrugged it off, attributing it to his focus on his duties. Little did she know, that fleeting moment of eye contact would soon escalate into a confrontation that would change everything. General Washington continued her exploration of the mall. As she approached the food court, the aroma of freshly baked bread and sizzling stir-fry filled the air. The space was lively, with families gathered around tables, friends sharing meals, and individuals enjoying a quiet moment with a book or laptop. She decided to treat herself to a coffee and perhaps a small snack. The cafe she chose had a cozy atmosphere, with wooden tables, soft lighting, and a chalkboard menu featuring artisanal drinks and pastries. This was her new life, a blend of the familiar and the unknown, a chance to build something meaningful in a community she was beginning to love. As she enjoyed her snack, she noticed the police officer again. He was now standing near the entrance of the food court, his arms crossed and his eyes scanning the crowd. There was something about his demeanor that struck her as off, an intensity that seemed out of place in the relaxed atmosphere of the mall. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the book she had just purchased. She flipped through the pages, reading the first few lines and feeling a sense of anticipation for the story to come. Her peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of raised voices. She looked up to see the officer approaching a group of teenagers, his tone harsh and accusatory. The teens, who had been laughing and joking moments before, now looked confused and defensive. General Washington watched as the officer demanded their IDs, his voice carrying over the noise of the food court. The situation escalated quickly, with the officer becoming increasingly aggressive. She felt a pang of unease. This wasn't right. The officer's behavior was disproportionate to the situation, and she could see the fear in the teenager's eyes. She considered intervening but hesitated, unsure of how her involvement would be perceived. Before she could make a decision, the officer turned his attention to her. Their eyes met again, and this time, there was no polite nod. His gaze was intense, almost challenging. He began to walk toward her, his expression unreadable. General Washington set her book down, her instincts kicking in. She had faced countless high-pressure situations in her military career, but this was different. This was personal. As he approached, she prepared herself for whatever was to come, unaware that this moment would spark a chain of events that would reverberate far beyond the walls of the mall. Officer Richard Maxwell had been patrolling the mall for hours, his mood growing darker with each passing minute. The noise, the crowds, the sheer opulence of the place, it all grated on him. He hated this assignment. To him, the mall was a symbol of excess, a place where people flaunted their wealth while ignoring the real problems in the world. And today, it seemed especially crowded, the diversity of the shoppers only adding to his irritation. As he walked through the food court, his eyes scanned the crowd, looking for anything, or anyone, that seemed out of place. That's when he saw her, a black woman, dressed in a crisp white blazer and dark jeans, sitting alone at a cafe table. She stood out, not because of anything she was doing, but because of the way she carried herself, calm, confident, almost regal. It bothered him. Who was she to look so at ease in a place like this? Who does she think she is, he thought, his jaw tightening. Probably a thief or a swindler, acting like she belongs here. People like her always have something to hide, His mind raced with assumptions. He didn't know her, but he didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to set him on edge. In his experience, people like her, confident, unapologetic, were always trouble. They thought they could get away with anything. Well, he'd show her otherwise. Maxwell adjusted his belt, his hand brushing against the holster of his gun, and made his way toward her. As he approached, he noticed the shopping bags at her feet and the book in her hand. She looked harmless enough, but appearances could be deceiving. He had learned that the hard way. "Ma'am," he said, his voice sharp and authoritative, "can I see some identification?" She looked up at him, her expression calm but questioning. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. He didn't like her tone. It was too confident, too unafraid. "I need to see your ID," he repeated, his voice rising slightly. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area, and I need to verify your presence here." She hesitated for a moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a military ID. "I'm Major General Jasmine Washington," she said, holding it out to him. Maxwell took the ID, his eyes scanning it quickly. "Major General," he thought, his stomach tightening. No way. "This has to be fake, he glanced back at her, his suspicion growing. Who was this woman, really? And why was she here, of all places? Maxwell's grip tightened on the ID as he scrutinized it. The laminated card looked official, with its gold emblem and crisp lettering, but he wasn't convinced. Major General, he thought again, his mind racing. A woman like her? No way, he had seen enough fakes in his career to know that anyone could forge an ID, especially someone trying to blend into a place like this. This doesn't prove anything, he muttered, more to himself than to her. His voice was low, but the edge in his tone was unmistakable. You could have stolen this. General Washington's eyes widened in disbelief, her calm demeanor faltering for the first time. Excuse me, she said, her voice rising slightly. I'm a decorated officer in the United States Army. I've served this country for over 2 decades. Are you seriously accusing me of stealing my own ID? Maxwell's face flushed, but he didn't back down. He couldn't. Not now. Not in front of the growing crowd of onlookers. I'm just doing my job, he snapped, his voice louder now. You need to come with me for further questioning. The tension in the air was palpable. Nearby shoppers had stopped to watch the exchange, their conversations replaced by hushed whispers. A young couple at a nearby table exchanged worried glances, while a group of teenagers pulled out their phones, recording the scene. General Washington could feel their eyes on her, but she refused to let the situation escalate. She took a deep breath, her training kicking in. Officer, she said, her voice steady but firm, I've done nothing wrong. I'm here shopping, just like everyone else. If you have a legitimate reason to detain me, I suggest you call your supervisor. Maxwell's jaw tightened, his frustration boiling over. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone like her. I don't need a supervisor to handle this, he said, his voice rising. You're coming with me, now. Before she could respond, he reached for his gun, drawing it and pointing it at her. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and General Washington froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had faced danger before, in war zones, in high-stakes negotiations, but never like this. Never in a place where she should have felt safe. The mall, once a symbol of comfort and community, had become a battleground. The moment Maxwell drew his gun, time seemed to slow. General Washington's military training kicked in, her body instinctively shifting into a defensive posture. Her hands rose slightly, palms open, a gesture meant to de-escalate the situation. But her mind was racing. She had been in high-pressure situations before, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield or a hostile negotiation, this was a mall, a place where people came to relax and enjoy themselves. And yet, here she was, staring down the barrel of a gun held by someone who was supposed to protect her. Officer, she said, her voice calm but firm, this is unnecessary. I've shown you my ID. I've done nothing wrong. Lower your weapon. Maxwell's grip on the gun tightened, his finger hovering near the trigger. His face was flushed, his breathing heavy. He could feel the weight of the crowd's eyes on him, their whispers growing louder. He didn't like this. He didn't like being questioned, didn't like being challenged. And he certainly didn't like the way she was looking at him, like she was the one in control. "I said, you're coming with me," he repeated, his voice shaking with anger. Now. General Washington didn't move. She couldn't. Not with a gun pointed at her. But she also couldn't let him take her, not like this. She knew what could happen if she complied, knew the stories of people who had been taken into custody under false pretenses and never made it home. She had to stand her ground. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Not until you holster your weapon and call your supervisor." Maxwell's eyes narrowed, his frustration boiling over. He took a step closer, the gun still trained on her. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he snarled. "I'm the one with the badge here." The crowd was growing restless. A man in a suit stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Officer, maybe we should all just take a breath here," he said, his voice calm but firm. "There's no need for this to escalate." Maxwell's head snapped toward the man, his eyes blazing. "Stay out of this," he barked. "This doesn't concern you." The man hesitated, then took a step back, his hand still raised. But the damage was done. The crowd was no longer just watching, they were recording. Phones were out, cameras pointed at the scene unfolding before them. Maxwell could feel the weight of their judgment, their disapproval. It only made him angrier. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. General Washington remained still, her hands raised slightly, her eyes locked on Maxwell's. She could see the conflict in his face, the anger, the fear, the desperation to maintain control. She knew she had to tread carefully. One wrong move, one wrong word, and this situation could spiral out of control. "Officer," she said again, her voice calm but firm, "I understand you're doing your job. But pointing a gun at an unarmed civilian is not protocol. Let's resolve this peacefully." Maxwell's hand trembled slightly, the gun wavering in his grip. He could feel the weight of the crowd's eyes on him, their phones recording his every move. He hated this. He hated her. She was making him look weak, and he couldn't let that stand. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job," he snapped, his voice rising. "I don't care who you think you are. You're coming with me, now." General Washington's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. "I'm not resisting," she said evenly. "But I will not be intimidated or bullied. If you have a legitimate reason to detain me, call your supervisor. Otherwise, lower your weapon." The crowd murmured, their voices a mix of shock and outrage. A woman in the back shouted, "Leave her alone. She didn't do anything." Others joined in, their voices rising in a chorus of support for General Washington. Maxwell's face flushed with anger. He turned to the crowd, his gun still pointed at General Washington. "Shut up," he yelled, his voice cracking under the strain. "All of you, shut up. This is police business." But the crowd didn't back down. If anything, they grew louder, their voices a cacophony of anger and disbelief. Maxwell's hand tightened on the gun, his finger brushing against the trigger. He was losing control, and he knew it. General Washington saw the shift in his demeanor, the way his eyes darted around the room, the way his breathing grew ragged. She knew she had to act, but she also knew she had to be careful. One wrong move, and this could end in tragedy. "Officer," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "this doesn't have to end badly. Lower your weapon. Let's talk this through." Maxwell's eyes flicked back to her, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. For a moment, it seemed like he might listen. But then his jaw tightened, and he took a step closer, the gun still trained on her. "I'm not asking again," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're coming with me." The tension in the mall was palpable, the air thick with unease as Officer Maxwell's confrontation with General Washington reached its peak. The crowd, now fully aware of the injustice unfolding before them, stood frozen, their phones recording every moment. The scene was a stark reminder of the systemic issues that plagued society: racial profiling, abuse of power, and the courage it takes to stand up against injustice. Have you ever felt profiled or unfairly targeted in a public space? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story matters, and together, we can shed light on the injustices that too often go unnoticed. What would you do if you saw this happening? Comment below. Your voice and actions can make a difference in holding those in power accountable. If you are enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. By supporting this channel, you're helping to amplify important stories and spark meaningful conversations about the issues that matter most. Each like, each comment, each subscription was a step toward building a more just and equitable society. As the confrontation between Officer Maxwell and General Washington reached its boiling point, a young man named Kevin stood among the crowd, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. He had been shopping for a birthday gift for his niece when he heard the raised voices and saw the commotion near the cafe. At first, he hesitated, unsure of what was happening. But when he saw Maxwell draw his gun and point it at General Washington, he knew he had to act. Kevin was no stranger to injustice. As a black man in his late 20s, he had experienced his fair share of profiling and discrimination. He knew what it felt like to be treated as a threat simply because of the color of his skin. And he knew that if he didn't do something, this situation could end in tragedy. With trembling hands, he opened his phone's camera and began recording. The scene before him was surreal: a decorated army general being threatened by a police officer in the middle of a crowded mall. Kevin's heart raced as he focused on the confrontation, his camera capturing every word, every gesture, every moment of tension. Maxwell noticed Kevin almost immediately. His eyes narrowed as he saw the phone pointed at him, and his anger flared. "Put that down," he barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "You have no right to record me." But Kevin didn't back down. He stood his ground, his phone steady in his hand. "I have every right," he said, his voice firm despite the fear coursing through him. "This is a public space, and I'm documenting what's happening." Maxwell's face turned red with rage. He took a step toward Kevin, his gun still trained on General Washington. "I said, put it down," he shouted, his voice echoing through the mall. Kevin's heart pounded, but he didn't move. He knew how important this footage was. He knew it could be the only evidence of what was happening. And he knew he couldn't let Maxwell intimidate him into silence. The crowd around them grew louder, their voices rising in support of Kevin and General Washington. "Let him record," someone shouted. "We're watching you," yelled another. The tension in the air was electric, the situation teetering on the edge of chaos. As the crowd's voices grew louder, the situation escalated. Maxwell, now visibly flustered, turned his attention back to General Washington, his gun still pointed at her. But the presence of Kevin's camera and the growing crowd had shifted the dynamic. People were no longer passive bystanders, they were active participants, their phones out, recording every moment. Kevin kept his camera steady, his focus unwavering. He knew this footage could make a difference. It could expose the injustice of what was happening and hold Maxwell accountable. But he also knew the risks. Maxwell was unpredictable, and the situation could turn violent at any moment. "Officer," General Washington said, her voice calm but firm, "this has gone far enough. Lower your weapon and call your supervisor. This doesn't have to end badly." Maxwell's hand trembled, his finger brushing against the trigger. He was losing control, and he knew it. The crowd's voices, the cameras, the pressure, it was all too much. But before he could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Officer Maxwell, stand down." The command was sharp and authoritative, and it came from a woman in a police captain's uniform. Captain Michelle Grant had arrived on the scene, her presence immediately commanding attention. She was tall and imposing, with a no-nonsense demeanor that left no room for argument. Maxwell turned to face her, his expression a mix of surprise and defiance. "Captain, he began, but Grant cut him off. "I said, stand down," she repeated, her voice cold and steady. "Holster your weapon. Now." For a moment, it seemed like Maxwell might resist. His grip on the gun tightened, his jaw clenched. But then, reluctantly, he lowered the weapon and slid it back into its holster. The crowd let out a collective breath, the tension in the air easing slightly. Grant stepped forward, her eyes scanning the scene. She took in the crowd, the phones, the fear and anger on people's faces. Then her gaze landed on General Washington, and recognition flickered in her eyes. "General Washington," she said, her tone respectful but urgent. "Are you all right?" General Washington nodded, her posture straight but her expression weary. "I'm fine, Captain. But this situation could have ended very differently." Grant's jaw tightened, and she turned back to Maxwell, her eyes blazing. "What the hell were you thinking?" she demanded, her voice low but fierce. "You drew your weapon on an unarmed civilian in a crowded mall. Do you have any idea how reckless that was?" Maxwell opened his mouth to respond, but Grant cut him off again. "Save it," she snapped. "You're done here. Go wait in the squad car. We'll deal with this later." Maxwell hesitated, his face red with anger and humiliation. But under Grant's steely gaze, he had no choice. He turned and walked away, the crowd parting to let him through. Got it. Let's revise this section to reflect General Washington's decision not to give an immediate statement or press charges, as well as Captain Grant's attempt to control the narrative by asking people to delete the footage, even though she knows it's unlikely to work. Here's the updated version. As Maxwell retreated, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of relief and lingering anger. Captain Grant turned back to General Washington, her expression softening slightly. "General, I apologize for what just happened," she said, her voice sincere. "This is not how we operate, and I assure you, it will be addressed." General Washington nodded, her calm demeanor returning. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your intervention. But I don't intend to press charges or make a statement right now. I just want to go home." Grant studied her for a moment, surprised but respectful of her decision. "Understood," she said. "But if you change your mind, we'll be here to support you. This kind of behavior is unacceptable, and we will handle it internally." General Washington gave a small, tired smile. "I know you will. But for now, I just want to put this behind me." Grant nodded, then turned to the crowd, raising her hands to signal for calm. "Everyone, please, the situation is under control. Thank you for your concern, but we need to clear the area and allow us to handle this." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd, many of whom still had their phones out, recording. She knew the footage was already out of her control, but she had to try. "I'm asking everyone to delete any recordings of this incident," she said, her tone firm but measured. "This is an ongoing matter, and sharing this footage could interfere with our investigation." The crowd exchanged uneasy glances, but no one moved to delete anything. Kevin, still holding his phone, stepped forward. "Captain, with all due respect, people need to see what happened here. This isn't just about one officer, it's about accountability." Grant's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She knew the request was futile. The footage was already spreading, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Instead, she turned back to General Washington. "General, if you need anything, anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out." General Washington nodded. "Thank you, Captain. I will." As Grant escorted General Washington toward the mall exit, the crowd began to disperse, their voices buzzing with conversation. Kevin stayed behind, his phone still in hand. He knew this wasn't over. The video he had captured was already making its way online, and the fallout would be swift. Within hours, Kevin's video began to spread like wildfire. It started on social media, shared by local activists and community members who were outraged by what they saw. The clip was short but damning, Officer Maxwell pointing his gun at General Washington, his voice sharp and aggressive, while she remained calm but firm. The caption accompanying the video was simple but powerful, *, racist cop pulls gun on Black Army general in upscale mall. This is unacceptable. *. The video quickly gained traction, racking up thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands. Hashtags like #Justice for General Washington and #End Police Brutality began trending, with people from all over the country sharing their outrage. Comments flooded in, many expressing disbelief and anger. How dare he treat a decorated officer like that? Imagine what he does to regular civilians, one user wrote. This is why we need accountability. No one should have to go through this, another commented. General Washington handled that with so much grace. I would have been terrified, a third added. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately. Local stations ran segments with headlines like *, Mall confrontation sparks outrage, Army general targeted by police. *, national networks followed suit, with pundits debating the incident on live TV. Clips of the video played on repeat, each frame analyzed and dissected. The police department, caught off guard by the rapid spread of the video, scrambled to respond. They released a statement late that evening, attempting to control the narrative. It read, "We are aware of the incident that occurred earlier today at the upscale mall involving one of our officers and a civilian. While the civilian in question allegedly annoyed the officer, we acknowledged that his response was inappropriate and not in line with our protocols. The officer has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We take these matters seriously and are committed to ensuring accountability." The statement backfired almost immediately. The use of the word "annoyed" to describe General Washington's actions sparked even more outrage. Social media exploded with criticism. Annoyed? She was shopping. How is that annoying? One tweet read. So now being black in public is annoying. This is textbook racial profiling, another user wrote. The fact that they're trying to blame her is disgusting. This department needs a complete overhaul, a third commented. The backlash was swift and unrelenting. Protesters gathered outside the police department, holding signs that read, "Justice for General Washington," and *, "End racial profiling now." Community leaders called for transparency and accountability, while civil rights organizations demanded a full investigation into Maxwell's history and the department's handling of the incident. As the video continued to circulate, the public outcry grew louder. News outlets dug deeper into the story, uncovering details about Officer Maxwell's past. It didn't take long for reporters to find a pattern of complaints against him, multiple allegations of racial profiling, excessive force, and unprofessional conduct. Each new revelation added fuel to the fire, painting a picture of a department that had repeatedly failed to hold one of its own accountable. Meanwhile, General Washington remained quiet, choosing not to make any public statements. Her silence only added to the public's admiration for her. People saw her as a symbol of grace under pressure, a stark contrast to Maxwell's aggression. General Washington is a hero. She didn't deserve this, but she handled it with dignity, one tweet read. This woman has served our country, and this is how she's treated. Shame on that officer and the department, another user wrote. We need more leaders like General Washington and fewer like Officer Maxwell, a third commented. The police department, now under intense scrutiny, held a press conference to address the growing backlash. Captain Grant stood at the podium, her expression stern but composed. We understand the public's concerns, and we share them, she said. The actions of Officer Maxwell do not reflect the values of this department. We are conducting a thorough investigation and will take appropriate action based on the findings. But it was the department's earlier statement, claiming that General Washington had annoyed Maxwell, that truly ignited her decision to speak out. Until then, she had hoped to move on quietly, not wanting to escalate the situation further. But the dismissive tone of the statement, the implication that she had somehow provoked Maxwell's aggression, was the final straw. The next day, General Washington held a press conference of her own. Dressed in her military uniform, her posture straight and her voice steady, she addressed the cameras with a quiet intensity that commanded attention. "I did not want to be here today," she began. "I had hoped to put this incident behind me and focus on my new life in this community. But when I heard the police department's statement, when I heard them say that I annoyed Officer Maxwell, I knew I could not stay silent." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I was shopping. I was doing nothing more than what any other person in that mall was doing. And yet, I was treated like a criminal. I was threatened, humiliated, and made to feel unsafe in a place where I should have felt welcome. And now, instead of taking accountability, the department is trying to shift the blame onto me. That is unacceptable." Her words struck a chord, not just with those in the room but with the millions watching at home. The press conference went viral within minutes, and the public outcry reached a fever pitch. The police department, already under fire, now faced even greater scrutiny. Captain Grant issued a second statement, this time apologizing directly to General Washington and promising a full, transparent investigation. But for many, it was too little, too late. As the public outcry intensified, the investigation into Officer Maxwell's past began to uncover a troubling pattern of behavior. Reporters and activists dug through public records, uncovering multiple complaints filed against him over the years. The allegations ranged from racial profiling to excessive force, with several cases settled out of court to avoid further scrutiny. One particularly damning case involved a young black man who had been pulled over for a broken taillight. Maxwell had escalated the situation, using aggressive language and unnecessary force, ultimately arresting the man on trumped-up charges. The case was later dismissed, but the man's family had filed a complaint against Maxwell, which was quietly buried by the department. Another case involved a Latina woman who had been stopped while walking home from work. Maxwell had accused her of looking suspicious and demanded to search her bag. When she refused, he threatened to arrest her. The incident was captured on a neighbor's security camera, but the footage mysteriously disappeared before it could be used as evidence. These stories, along with others, painted a clear picture of a man who had abused his power for years, shielded by a system that prioritized protecting its own over holding them accountable. The revelations sparked even more outrage, with protesters demanding Maxwell's immediate termination and criminal charges. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the police department was scrambling to control the narrative. Captain Grant, under pressure from higher-ups, ordered a review of all CCTV footage from the mall on the day of the incident. But when officers arrived to collect the footage, they were told it had already been copied and removed. Unbeknownst to them, General Washington had anticipated this move. Shortly after the confrontation, she had quietly approached mall security and requested a copy of the footage. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the security team had complied, handing her a USB drive with the full recording. When the department realized the footage was missing, they panicked. Without it, they had no way to corroborate or challenge the narrative being shaped by Kevin's video and the public outcry. Captain Grant called General Washington, hoping to negotiate the return of the footage. "General, we need that footage for our investigation," Grant said, her tone measured but urgent. "I understand your concerns, but this is a matter of internal protocol." General Washington's response was firm. "Captain, with all due respect, I've seen how your department handles internal protocol. This footage is evidence, and it belongs in the hands of those who will ensure it's used properly. I've already shared it with my legal team and the media." The call ended with Grant frustrated but resigned. She knew the department's credibility was hanging by a thread, and the missing footage was just another blow. The release of the CCTV footage was a turning point in the case. General Washington's legal team, working with a trusted media outlet, published the full recording alongside a detailed timeline of events. The footage confirmed everything Kevin's video had shown, and more. It captured the entire confrontation, from Maxwell's initial approach to his aggressive escalation in the moment he drew his weapon. The footage also revealed something Kevin's video hadn't: the moment General Washington calmly handed over her military ID only for Maxwell to dismiss it as fake. It showed her composed demeanor, even as he pointed a gun at her, and the growing crowd of bystanders who began recording the incident. The media coverage was relentless. Headlines like "CCTV footage exposes police brutality," "Army general targeted in mall confrontation" dominated the news cycle. Pundits and legal experts dissected the footage, pointing out every violation of protocol and every moment where Maxwell's actions crossed the line. The department, now under immense pressure, had no choice but to act. Maxwell was formally suspended without pay, pending a full investigation. But for many, this wasn't enough. Calls for his termination and criminal charges grew louder, with civil rights organizations and community leaders leading the charge. Behind the scenes, the department was in turmoil. Captain Grant arranged a private meeting with General Washington, hoping to address the situation directly. What General Washington didn't know was that the head of the police department, Chief Harold Reynolds, would also be in attendance. The meeting took place in a small conference room at the department's headquarters. Chief Reynolds, a stern man in his late 50s with a reputation for being tough but fair, sat at the head of the table. Captain Grant sat to his right, her expression tense but determined. General Washington, dressed in her military uniform, sat across from them, her posture straight and her demeanor calm. "General Washington," Chief Reynolds began, his voice formal but respectful, "first, let me apologize for what happened. This incident is unacceptable, and it does not reflect the values of this department." General Washington nodded but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "We've suspended Officer Maxwell, and we're conducting a full investigation," Reynolds said. "But I want to assure you that we're committed to making this right. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to let us know." General Washington leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Thank you, Chief Reynolds. I appreciate the apology, but this isn't just about me. It's about the system that allowed this to happen. Officer Maxwell's actions didn't occur in a vacuum. They're the result of a culture that tolerates, and even enables, this kind of behavior." Reynolds' jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. He had heard similar criticisms before, but coming from someone of General Washington's stature, they carried more weight. Captain Grant, sensing the tension, spoke up. "General, we hear you. And we're committed to making changes. But we need your help. We need to know what steps you think we should take to address these issues." General Washington paused, considering her words carefully. "Transparency is key. The public needs to see that you're serious about accountability. That means releasing the findings of your investigation, holding Officer Maxwell accountable, and implementing real reforms, not just lip service." Reynolds exchanged a glance with Grant, his expression unreadable. "We'll take your suggestions under advisement," he said finally. "But I want you to know that we're committed to doing better." The meeting ended with handshakes and promises, but General Washington left with mixed feelings. She had said her piece, but she knew that real change would require more than just words. It would require action, and she was determined to hold them to it. How has social media changed the way we address issues of police misconduct? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters, and together, we can continue to push for transparency and accountability. What role do bystanders play in holding law enforcement accountable? Comment below. Your actions can make a difference in ensuring justice is served. The fallout from the mall incident went far beyond Officer Maxwell's suspension. It exposed deep-rooted issues within the police department and sparked a broader conversation about systemic racism, accountability, and the need for meaningful reform. General Washington's story became a symbol of resistance against racial injustice, and her calm, dignified response inspired countless others to speak out. Maxwell's actions were not an isolated incident. As the investigation into his past unfolded, it revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior that had been ignored or dismissed for years. Complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and unprofessional conduct had piled up, but the department had done little to address them. Instead, Maxwell had been allowed to continue patrolling the streets, his badge serving as a shield against accountability. The case also highlighted the broader implications of police misconduct. For many, it was a stark reminder of the systemic issues that allowed officers like Maxwell to operate with impunity. It underscored the need for comprehensive reform, not just in one department, but across the entire law enforcement system. General Washington, in her public statements, emphasized this point. "This isn't just about one officer," she said during a televised interview. "It's about a system that has failed too many people for too long. We need to address the root causes of this behavior and create a culture of accountability and transparency." Her words resonated with millions, sparking calls for action at the local, state, and national levels. Advocacy groups, lawmakers, and community leaders began pushing for reforms, from stricter oversight to better training and more robust mechanisms for holding officers accountable. As part of the investigation, the department was forced to revisit all of Maxwell's previous cases. Dozens of complaints were reviewed, and new evidence came to light. In one case, a young black man who had been wrongfully arrested by Maxwell years earlier came forward, demanding justice. His story, along with others, painted a damning picture of a man who had abused his power for years. The department also faced scrutiny for its handling of these cases. Why had so many complaints been dismissed or buried? Why had Maxwell been allowed to continue patrolling the streets despite numerous red flags? These questions fueled public outrage and added to the pressure for reform. One of the key themes that emerged from the incident was the importance of accountability and transparency in rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the community. For too long, the department had operated behind a veil of secrecy, dismissing complaints and protecting its own. But the public outcry over Maxwell's actions made it clear that this approach was no longer acceptable. Captain Grant, who had been thrust into the spotlight as the face of the department's response, knew that real change would require more than just words. She worked with community leaders and advocacy groups to develop a plan for increasing transparency and accountability. This included publicly releasing the findings of the investigation into Maxwell's actions. The report detailed his history of misconduct and the department's failures to address it, sparking further outrage but also demonstrating a commitment to transparency. Establishing an independent oversight board to review complaints against officers and ensure that they were handled fairly and impartially. Creating a public database of officer misconduct to increase accountability and allow the community to track the department's progress. The incident at the mall had a profound impact on the community, sparking difficult but necessary conversations about race, policing, and systemic injustice. For many, it was a wake-up call, a reminder of the deep-seated issues that had been ignored for too long. But it also provided an opportunity for dialogue and understanding, as people from all walks of life came together to share their experiences and work towards solutions. In the weeks following the incident, a series of town hall meetings were held across the city. These gatherings brought together community members, law enforcement officials, and local leaders to discuss the incident and its broader implications. The meetings were often emotional, with residents sharing personal stories of racial profiling, harassment, and mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement. One particularly powerful moment came during a meeting in a predominantly black neighborhood. A young mother stood up and described how her teenage son had been stopped and frisked by police multiple times, despite having no criminal record. "I'm tired of being afraid for my child," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I just want him to be able to walk down the street without being treated like a criminal." Her words resonated with many in the room, including Captain Grant, who had attended the meeting to listen and learn. "I hear you," Grant said, her voice sincere. And I'm sorry for what you and your son have experienced. We're working to change the culture within our department, but we know that words aren't enough. We need to earn your trust, and that starts with listening. The meetings were not without tension. Some residents expressed skepticism, questioning whether the department's promises of reform would lead to real change. Others called for more drastic measures, such as defunding the police or reallocating resources to community programs. But despite the disagreements, the meetings provided a space for open and honest dialogue, a crucial first step in the healing process. Officer Richard Maxwell's actions at the mall had far-reaching consequences, not just for himself but for the entire community. As the investigation into his conduct progressed, it became clear that his behavior was part of a larger pattern of misconduct that had been ignored for years. The department, under intense public pressure, had no choice but to hold him accountable. Maxwell was formally charged with multiple counts of misconduct, including racial profiling, abuse of authority, and unlawful use of force. The charges were based not only on the incident at the mall but also on the numerous complaints that had been uncovered during the investigation. The case went to trial, drawing national attention and reigniting the debate over police accountability. During the trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case, using the CCTV footage, witness testimonies, and Maxwell's own history to demonstrate a pattern of abusive behavior. General Washington was called to testify, and her calm, dignified demeanor made a powerful impression on the jury. She spoke not just about the incident at the mall but about the broader implications of Maxwell's actions. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about every person who has ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. It's about holding those in power accountable for their actions." Maxwell's defense team argued that he had been under immense pressure and that his actions were the result of stress and poor training. But the jury was unconvinced. After a lengthy deliberation, they found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to probation, community service, and mandatory counseling, and he was permanently barred from working in law enforcement. In the months following the trial, Maxwell was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. Stripped of his badge and his identity as a police officer, he struggled to come to terms with what he had done. He attended counseling sessions as part of his sentence, but progress was slow. His therapist noted that he often deflected blame, insisting that he had been set up or misunderstood. But as time went on, Maxwell began to show signs of genuine reflection. In one session, he broke down in tears, admitting that he had let his biases cloud his judgment. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said. "But I was wrong. I hurt people, and I can't take that back." The incident at the mall left an indelible mark on the community, serving as a catalyst for change and a reminder of the work that still needed to be done. It sparked a national conversation about racial profiling, police accountability, and the power of bystander intervention. But it also highlighted the resilience and strength of the community, as people came together to demand justice and push for reform. General Washington became a symbol of resistance against racial injustice, her calm and dignified response inspiring countless others to speak out. Her story was shared widely, not just in the media but in schools, churches, and community centers. She used her platform to advocate for systemic change, emphasizing the importance of accountability, transparency, and community engagement. "This isn't just about me," she said during a speech at a local university. "It's about all of us. It's about creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of the color of their skin." Kevin's decision to record the incident became a powerful example of the role bystanders can play in holding those in power accountable. His video, along with the CCTV footage, exposed the truth and sparked a movement for change. Kevin, though reluctant to be in the spotlight, became an advocate for bystander intervention, encouraging others to speak out against injustice. "It's not easy to step in," he said during an interview. "But if we don't, who will? We all have a responsibility to stand up for what's right." The reforms implemented by the police department were a step in the right direction, but they were just the beginning. The incident highlighted the need for systemic change, from better training and oversight to addressing the root causes of racial bias and inequality. Advocacy groups, lawmakers, and community leaders continued to push for meaningful reform, using the incident as a rallying cry. The incident at the mall was a wake-up call, a reminder of the work that still needed to be done. But it was also a testament to the power of unity and resilience. The community had come together to demand justice, to hold those in power accountable, and to push for a better future. And while the road ahead was long, there was hope. Change doesn't happen overnight, General Washington said. But if we keep working together, if we keep standing up for what's right, we can create a world where incidents like this are a thing of the past. That's the legacy we need to leave for future generations. As the story of General Washington and the mall incident comes to a close, it leaves us with a powerful call to action. This isn't just a story about one person or one moment, it's a story about all of us. It's a reminder that change begins with individual actions and that each of us has a role to play in creating a more just and equitable society. What steps can we take as individuals and communities to combat racial injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and together, we can continue to push for change. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with your friends. By spreading awareness, we can ensure that these important conversations continue and that stories like General Washington's are never forgotten. Thank you for watching. Your support helps us amplify important stories and spark meaningful conversations about the issues that matter most. Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect.